would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am that Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, do not hold that against me. Welcome to Wednesday, everyone. We are halfway through another week. I hope it's working out beyond your wildest dreams so far. Got a few tidbits for you today. We're going to talk, who knows how far we'll get. I actually have a long queue of stories to potentially talk about, so we see how far we get. As always, the absolute best way to get in contact with me is through the website. It's a veritable cornucopia of ways to get in contact with me and to consume the show. It is at therebelbroker.com. Go over there, check it out. You can click on contact in the menu bar and send along any ideas, suggestions, observations, or questions that you might have, and I'll be happy to respond to them. You will also find that we were slowly nudging the show, or at least the site, into new areas. I'm trying to add more easy ways to find the different ways to consume the show. Obviously, there's the RSS feed, right there at the website. Totally easy. iTunes, there's a link right there in the palette to the right. I've had some people tell me they don't see it or that it's not very noticeable, so I'm thinking about changing that, making it a little bit more noticeable. Right there in the middle of the site, right underneath the big player, is in the center of the screen are some buttons that you can click to get to consume the show on Google Play or on Stitcher, or I think I have an iTunes button up there. I may or may not. I actually don't think I do have an iTunes button there. I was looking for a good iTunes button earlier today and I couldn't find one. But in any event, it's a great place to go and find different stuff. It's also a great place to find the sponsors page. Now, if you want to support the show, head on over to the sponsors link. You'll see a list of the current sponsors. We have one right now from Audible. It's a great service. I love the fact that it will sync up with a digital book that I'm reading on my Kindle, and I get to a certain point on my Kindle and I quit out of that and I jump into my car and my Audible book syncs up to the same spot in the book, usually within a paragraph or two. It's pretty freaking amazing. I strongly suggest it. So if you're going to use it anyway, why not do it in a way that helps to benefit the show? Just go over to therebelbroker.com, click on sponsors, and make use of the link to audible.com. If you want to just enter it yourself, you're that kind of a rebel. You're just into typing your own URLs. It's audibletrial.com/rebel. That's audibletrial.com/rebel. Also, I have just rolled out, as of today, a invitation for folks to get in touch with me about the possibility of becoming a sponsor of the show. That is also on the same page as the sponsors page. If you're someone who has a product or service that you think would be good for my audience, please feel free to use that form to reach out to me. It's not an instant thing. It has to be something that we talk about it and make sure that it's a correct fit. And I'll be honest with you, I have had tons and tons of different people come to me in order to place an ad on the show. It would have been okay in terms of the amount of money it would have generated, but I just didn't feel comfortable with the product or service that they were pushing. And so I haven't done one yet, but now that I'm putting out the mat, I want to make it a formal process. So feel free to reach out if you think you've got that product or service that would be just right for the audience of Real Estate Realities. Of course, also, if you'd like to join the Rebel Underground, I'm already starting to work on some new stuff for that. You can join the Rebel Underground by texting the word Rebel Broker, the number 44222, or you can click the link in any of the show notes for any show. Today's show is no exception, where it just says join the Rebel Underground, and then you'll be taken to a page where you can join in to the Rebel Underground and receive that exclusive content. Finally, if you would like to get your name in the drawing for a $50 Amazon gift card, we're going to be doing that this Friday. We do it every month at the beginning of the month, and this is no different. So we've done it up to about $500, $550 worth. I'm really not sure where we're at this point. But in order to join in, you need to go to the website, therebelbroker.com, click the big red button at the top of the page titled Take the Survey to Support the Show. You'll be asked for your email address twice. Use the same email address both times. Then you'll also be asked a handful of demographic-style questions, because that's the purpose of the thing, is to just get demographic information on the typical listener. And that's it. Your email address is what links you to the drawing. If you put an email address in that is a dead email address or one you never check, you don't want to use that email address, because if you win, that's how I'm going to tell you won. And if after I tell you you've won via email, I don't hear back with you within a couple of days, I'm going to go to the next person on the list who won. So keep that in mind as you go and you register for this. You're doing me a great favor. So in return, I'm putting you in that drawing for the $50 Amazon gift card. And I thank you for that. And congrats to the folks who've won, and good luck to the folks who have yet to win. Okay. So one thing I wanted to talk about today that I think is super important. As you might guess, I have a lot of stuff on my plate. I have a large number of things outside of just doing the show that I have to accomplish every day. And we've talked a lot, if you've been a listener for a long time, you know that I think right around the new year, between 2014, 2015, or maybe 2015, 2016, I don't even remember now. It was the first year we liberated ourselves from Blog Talk Radio. But anyway, we talked about how to achieve your goals. And we talked about creating plans and using different tools to help you achieve your goals by not losing sight of them, right? I talked about Google Calendar as one that's great for doing that, because you can just tell it the thing you're interested in accomplishing, the different times of the day you'd be willing to do it, and then it'll move it as you schedule other things, but it never lets it go away until you specifically tell it you've achieved that goal. So that's a great tool, and I suggest you all go out and use it. But, tools like that are going to get you nowhere if you do not have the energy to pursue those efforts, right? I think one of the things that can oftentimes beat us down is just being dog tired, low energy. Now, just to warn you, this does not lead up to me doing a push for the first sponsor of the show. This is what I'm about to talk about is zero money for me. This is me promoting a product that I am promoting because I am falling in love with it. It is doing amazing things for me in terms of my energy level. Now, I'm very much at the beginning, so who knows? It might be one of those things where at the beginning you get a lot of payoff and it ebbs away a little bit over time. And I'll be happy to maybe once a week give you an update on how this is working for me. But, then there are also personal things in my life that I'm trying to achieve that have nothing to do with, how many deals I close or how successful the podcast is or how many subscribers I have. That are just about me personally, things that make me feel better about just my day to day. So I went searching for something that would help me do more. I mean, I would get home sometimes and have another 2 hours, 3 hours worth of stuff I'd have to do. It might be 7 or 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And I still got what is for most people a quarter to a half a day's worth of work to do. And I'm done. I'm completely baked out, and I'm really not interested in pursuing anything else. And it was starting to annoy me. It was bugging me that I couldn't muster the mind over matter to just push through and do the work. And then when I did muster it up, the effort felt lackluster when it was over. It felt like I hadn't given it all I could have given it if I'd been in a better frame of mind. So, of course, there's all kinds of wonderful ways to achieve that in your life. I know exercise is good, a healthy diet, all those kinds of wonderful things. But if you're like me, you also have a difficult time putting aside time to devote 30 minutes or an hour to working out. And I'm willing to have a complete psychological discussion about how that might simply be me avoiding that. Because I don't enjoy working out. I don't enjoy doing things that make me sweat and exercise, but I prefer a thing that involves a process rather than just lifting a weight, right? I wouldn't mind, kicking a soccer ball around or doing other things or swimming, but just lifting weights is kind of boring for me. But anyway, that's off topic. Apologies. I'm the shiny things are attracting me. But I have discovered something that and I've tried a lot of different stuff, right? There's two things in my life that I have sort of embraced over the last couple of weeks to try to solve a variety of problems in my life. And I wanted to share it with you because I have felt a positive effect. And I'm not saying this is going to be the same thing for everybody, but I can tell you that if you are a middle-aged fat guy who wants more energy, that these strategies might just work for you. Now, and I'm not happy about being a fat guy, so that's another thing I'm trying to fix. But one of the things I did, and again, this is me trying to give you things you can try in your own life to address specific stuff. So if you're someone who's already in shape physically and feeling great and you've got all the energy you need, great. But what I'm going to talk about here is maybe folks who are feeling a little more tired earlier in the day or not feeling like they're able to give things their 100% effort just because the energy reserves are draining. So the first thing I jumped into was doing what's called intermittent fasting. And this is really where you establish a window of time in the day where you're only allowed to eat during that window. So the totally hardcore folks do the noon to 4 thing. You're only allowed to eat from noon to 4. You can have coffee and tea and water, obviously, outside of those times, but you can't have anything with sugar in it, which has to do with, you don't want your body generating insulin, which then also contributes to fat retention. You can YouTube this stuff for more info. But for me, what I ended up embracing was this noon to 5:30 thing, where that's really my window where I eat. So I'll only eat during that window. And as long as I stick to that, I start losing weight and I start doing well. So there's a suggestion for the weight side of things. But I still wasn't getting the energy benefits. Now, I'm firmly convinced that once I lose 50 pounds, my goal is to lose just shy of 100 pounds. And once I get halfway there, I'm willing to bet I'm going to see a marked difference in my energy levels just from that. You can't have a body carrying around an extra 100 pounds worth of tissue to support and expect that you won't be tired as a result of that. So how do you keep that energy level up? How do you kind of keep things percolating so that you can push through and do more? I'm going to put a link in today's show. Again, this is not, maybe I could figure out a way that I'd get something from it because I do have an Amazon store. But anyway, that's for books. I don't think I could do it for this. It's called Bulletproof Brain Octane Oil. And I know the title sounds very goofy. Reliable and quick source of energy. 16 ounces what I bought. But it is this odorless, tasteless stuff that is an extract of coconut oil. Now, I had been taking coconut oil pills for a while because I'd read some of the good things about it, but did a little digging and a little more research and discovered that what you really want is just the MCTs in there without the lauric or whatever it's called acid that's also in coconuts. So what this is it's a much more refined version that takes out that negative acid that's in there that isn't really beneficial and makes it much higher impact, much better effect. So and you can read their blurb on it and you can actually Google it. And there's a whole website dedicated to this. If you've heard of bulletproof coffee, this is that. This is one of the things that you can add to bulletproof coffee. What a lot of folks, the oil that most people add to bulletproof coffee is coconut oil, but not this super refined stuff. And I've tried all the other stuff. This stuff I just started using on Friday last week. And I have to say, since that is the only thing I changed in my diet, I'm absolutely stunned with the results. Typically my day equals getting up, doing some things, doing a little work, sitting down at the desk and making myself some tea now. Tea, it used to be coffee with chocolate in it. You can't do mochas. Sorry. That's breaking the whole sugar rule before noon. So I started doing tea and I put a full tablespoon. You may want to work up to a tablespoon. My understanding is this stuff can also have a very negative effect on you in terms of giving you a stomach ache or it's one of those things you have to grow into apparently. But anyway, I had already been taking the coconut stuff in pill form for so long, I figured I'd be all right. So I jumped into 1 tablespoon and the difference is noticeable relatively quickly. This is not your standard caffeine buzz that you get. And in terms of cognitive churning, I'm feeling like I'm more with it. I'm more alert and I'm more able to accomplish things and for longer. So, and that's been true now every day. I haven't cut anything from what I'm doing. In fact, over the last few days since Friday, I've been doing more every day. So while I should be more tired, I've actually had more energy. I've been able to sit down at 10 o'clock and get to work on the podcast. I've been able to finish all the work around the house I was doing, plus do some real estate business, plus do some other things, and still have energy to go. So no money for me. This is just me sharing with you something that rose to the top of my mind enough to share with you because of the results I've been getting. Bulletproof Brain Octane Oil, amplified energy and mental performance is their push line. I think this stuff is great. It's been working exceptionally well for me. And as I said, over the course of the last week, this is the only thing I've changed. I'm very much a guy who tries to analyze the effectiveness and the efficacy of things in my life by only changing one thing at a time, right? And that applies to, and this is something you can apply to everything. When I'm doing advertising for real estate, for instance, or for my business, I do it in cycles. And I will only change one thing at any given point because I want to be able to know that the reason I got 5 extra calls this week or more leads, or the reason my leads got to be a higher quality this week are most likely this change, because this is the only thing I've changed in the last week, right? I do the same thing whenever it's something I consume. I don't usually change 5 different things all at once. I do them one at a time, look for a little bit of a change over a couple of weeks, and then I'll introduce the next thing and see if there's a change built up on top of that. You can choose to do the same thing or not, but I'll tell you what, I will be very surprised if you do not see very significant positive results from introducing this brain octane oil stuff into your diet. So I just thought I'd share that with you. As I said, there will be a link in the show notes. And absolutely, I'm making no money from this. The folks from, I'm not even sure what the name of the company is. What's the name of the company? Is it just Bulletproof? Is that what they're called? In any event, I'm not getting a check from them. They're not a sponsor of the show. This is really just me sharing with you. And think about all the things you do in your day-to-day life. This is what, and the last time I told you that I suggested you go get something, I can't even remember the last time. So it's probably been years, if ever. This is strictly just because of the great results I've been getting. So head out, check it out. In fact, as I'm sitting here with you right now, I've just ordered another 16-ounce bottle so that I can have one that I can carry around with me mobile. And so if I have to eat afternoon and I'm out mobile, I'll have one with me traveling. So good stuff. I suggest you make it a part of your routine. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break right here, but when we come back, we're going to do some actual real estate chatting. I know I kind of made a weak attempt to make this relate to real estate by talking about energy levels and things, and I think that's true, but we'll get into the real deal in just a second, so don't go away. Are you ready to jump in and start your search for your first investment property? Maybe you've decided that it's time to own your own home, or maybe you're ready to sell your home and move on to something new. No matter what your goal is, the Rebel Broker can help. That's right, aside from hosting this show, I am also the owner, broker of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Silicon Valley. With over 25 years experience serving Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I or one of my great agents can help you achieve your goals in real estate. So if you're ready to look into taking that next step towards achieving your real estate goals, point your browser at www.soldbyrobert.com. That's www.soldbyrobert.com and get in touch. Let me show you how I will earn your business and your respect. Again, that's www.soldbyrobert.com, or you can call me at 408-852-0525. California Bureau of Real Estate ID 00984-909. Welcome back, everyone. So we spent the first part of the show kind of talking about a thing I've stumbled across that really helps you with cognitive processes, getting your brain working in a little bit more of a well-oiled machine kind of style, plus increasing energy levels. And just so I'm clear, it's in the morning when I take it. I don't wait till noon to take it. I'll take a cup of tea and I'll dump it in the tea, and then I drink it down. And that's kind of how I've been consuming it. I've had such great results, I almost feel tempted to add a second tablespoon later in the day, but so far I haven't really needed to do that. And it's great stuff, and hopefully you guys will get the same benefit from it that I have. All right, first thing on the hit parade today in terms of the latest real estate news from Housing Wire, median home prices climbed nearly 20% in Northwest metros in July. Some good news is that the housing inventory is up slightly from last year, but clearly not enough to come anywhere near meeting demand. And of course, I will be in the Northwest coming up here pretty soon. I'll be driving my son up to the Seattle area for school. I'm almost sure I'll be meeting a listener up there, maybe two, who reached out to me when they heard that my son was going to be going to DigiPen. So that could be fun. It'd be fun to have a little coffee with listeners. Now, home prices continue to rise in the Northwest in July, hitting nearly 20% increases in some areas, according to the latest report from the Northwest Multiple Listing Services. Home prices increased an average of 9% in the Northwest area in July, according to the report, which covers 23 counties in and around Washington state. Some counties near high job growth areas saw even higher increases. King County, for example, saw its median home price jump 18.6% from last year. Inventory shortages continue to persist. However, the Northwest added slightly more new listings in July than in 2016. Quote, we should be entering the summer old doldrums, but I don't see that happening, according to some folks over at Coldwell Banker. Inventory remains low, but prices and demand continue to increase, prompting murmurs of a looming bubble. They went on to explain that there are many mixed feelings about the likelihood of a new bubble. The most recent Case-Shiller results showed housing is not repeating the bubble period. We talked about that here on this show. I think Case-Shiller is incorrect, and I don't think that's too hard to sort of think your way through. If you were to go ahead and do a search on Case-Shiller on my website at therebelbroker.com, you'd be able to pull up that old show. I'll see if I can't put a link to it in the show notes for today's show, so you can check it out if you're a new arrival to the show and hadn't heard that one. Now, the MLS added 12,300 new listings in July, just 122 more than July last year, but down from June's 13,658 listings, which isn't horribly unusual in terms of just general trends in a marketplace. At the end of July, there were 15,749 total active listings, down 13.9% from last year's 18,287 listings. This represents 1.6 months of supply in the Northwest Multiple Listing Service. Now, that's kind of the payoff number right there. If you don't have 3 months or more, you have a ridiculously large low inventory problem. Despite this low inventory level, pending home sales increased 1.3% from last year's 11,645 to 11,800 sales this year. In King County, however, where inventory dropped nearly 20%, pending home sales fell about 7.4%. So, that's to kind of calibrate you to where the craziness has grown. And here's the flip side of that, right? So the craziness obviously is happening where I am. I am nearly in the eye of the storm in terms of crazy real estate. The eye is just a little bit north of me in the San Jose, Silicon Valley, Sunnyvale, Santa Clara area, Cupertino, that type of stuff. But it absolutely has a reach going all the way down south of Gilroy, which is south of me. And the craziness now is clearly taking stronghold in the Northwest. This data clearly points that out. But on the flip side of that, I had a listener who consumes the show via via YouTube, talking about their concerns and how there are homes on the market for forever where they are. Well, he lives in the high desert of California, some areas that tend to be challenging. So it's a micro thing. You need to figure out what's going on in your marketplace. Now, the reality is that part of this equation needs to be you figuring out where the best place to spend your money is as an investor or as a buyer, and when to spend that money. Now, we've talked an awful lot about what to expect down the road. And for me, I believe what I see and believe I'm seeing enough that I'm planning to sell my home and not buy another one immediately, right? So if I believe the market was going to continue to grow and grow and grow, my solution to that would be buy another house. I would be buying a smaller house. I don't need the size house I currently have. But I would, the logical step, if I didn't believe what I'm saying, would be for me to buy another home as soon as possible. That would be less expensive because it would be smaller, but buy it as soon as possible, right? Because the theory would be prices are going to continue to go up. And that's not my plan. I have entertained ideas all the way from living in an RV for a year and then all the way back up to renting a home. I'm leaning towards renting a home just to comfort everyone. But that's how strongly I think this stuff is going. And we'll see how it goes. I may end up being a year from now. We all may talk about and joke about how stupid the Rebel Broker is, which would mean we'd probably be talking in a completely different show because I wouldn't think that I have much juice to talk about real estate anymore at that point. But there you go. And you can see if you've come along with me on this thought process of figuring out what is happening and what the likely problems we're going to face in the next year or two are. I had a super interesting conversation with a guy yesterday who wanted to talk to me about my podcast. I won't give away any of his information. I didn't get his permission to divulge any of that. But we were talking back and forth, and he's pretty convinced as well that things are looking like they're heading in the wrong direction. I believe that he is in Phoenix, and we got a chance to talk a little bit about that. And he just when you talk about the ratios of income increase versus cost of living increase or cost of housing increase, that disparity just cannot survive. We're not in an environment where pay is going to catch up. So something has got to give, right? That's just kind of the way things work. So we'll see how it all plays out. But I sure know what I'm putting my money on. Now, the other big headline I wanted to discuss, and it really fits right into what we've been talking about in terms of setting the stage for another bubble. And here's something else. I had another listener who reached out to me saying, that they don't think anything's going to happen in terms of a bubble in the real estate industry. So I don't disagree with that. I do think we are doing things that could absolutely facilitate another real estate focused downturn. I've been saying for a long time after we went through this last problem that the next problem we see won't come from real estate. I'm less convinced of that now just because of the amazing level of stupid things that we've done since then, over the last two years or so, particularly. But I think that something else bad will happen before real estate gets juiced up enough to do something. My feeling is that we're priming the pump enough for real estate problems, for something bad to happen, maybe in 2020, 2021, at least to reach sort of a critical mass. We've kind of accelerated even over the last year. So, maybe that's not so far out. However, look at all the other things that are going on. Whether you want to talk about pensions and how much they rely on the stock market in order to sustain themselves, even at the horrible levels they're at now. The Illinois pension system is bankrupt to the point where every single cent that comes in for taxes to the state of Illinois is now going to paying pension benefits. By law, there was a court case about it. By law, they have to pay that first. And once they've done that, there is not any money left to pay teachers, police officers, firemen, road crews, to pay the electric bill in the governor's mansion. There is none. So they're having to borrow all of that money. That's a concern because the other thing that's wrong with pensions is they've been assuming a 7.2% return on investment on all the stuff they have in the stock market, but they've been getting 0.7%. That's scary by itself, but also think about the kind of stock market we are in right now, where the values are way up at 22,000. Everybody out there seems to agree that there needs to be a correction. And a lot of folks seem to think that the stock market is valued at 5 times what its actual value should be. So even if you don't believe that, let's say you think that estimate is nuts. Well, that would still equal a price adjustment within the stock market that would bring it down to about 15,000, right? Approximately. Well, then that equals really bad things for the pension funds, because now the returns they're getting are even less than what they're getting now, which accelerates the downturn of other pensions in other states, makes Illinois' situation even worse. What happens next? The next domino in that one would be, how do you solve it? Well, there will be a great deal of talking about a lot of different solutions, but you can bet your bottom dollar that the solution will simply be that the federal government gives them money, which means it's on all of our backs. All of the states that were responsible with how they handled their state employees and didn't do pension programs, of which I think there are almost none, will be expected to have their citizens bear the expense of bailing out the idiot states that did this. And don't make any mistake about it. Pensions were dumb from the day they were brought up. It is a Ponzi scheme of the greatest degree. The only bigger Ponzi scheme is Social Security. But this is one of those situations where it was clearly an idiot thing to do at the very beginning. And as soon as you get these problems coming out and the federal government decides to bail it out, that means they give you money. Well, when they give you money, they have to print it. And this money will have velocity, meaning that once it gets out, it goes into the hands of people who will actually buy things. The last bailouts we did, because I've had some people say, well, we gave trillions of dollars to the banks, or 200 and something billion dollars to various banks. That didn't cause as much inflation as everyone expected. Well, that's because it didn't have velocity. That's because that money did not go into the hands of individual human beings who went out and bought bread, milk, cheese, cars, all that kind of wonderful stuff. It went into the hands of banks who held on to it. And if they did spend it, they didn't give it to an individual. They loaned it to an individual, right, to buy a house. And then that money went to another bank because they were buying a house, right? So the money never got any kind of mobility in the marketplace. That's called low velocity money. This time, you'd be getting money printed that's being paid directly to recipients of pensions, which gives it velocity, which means it goes right into the hands of people who will then spend it on things that they need from day to day. That is where I think the most proximal issues are that are likely to push us over the edge. And all of those things, any one mix, and then inflation happens, right? And suddenly the dollar you have today that buys you a gallon of milk won't buy you a gallon of milk a year from now. In fact, maybe it takes two of those dollars to buy that same gallon of milk. That's inflation, the invisible tax. Any of those things happen, real estate is hit. Real estate is no longer at the center of where that nuclear bomb goes off, but it's close enough that it's going to get a wicked tan and have a very crazy radiation signature. So we're screwed. It's still a very, very bad thing. And that's why I'm sort of in that mode. And I'm sorry if I've miscommunicated to make folks think that the biggest threat is stuff relating to real estate. I think there's an awful lot of things that are a threat to real estate, but I think we have other things that are likely to come home to roost before any of those things could ever start going nuts. We'll see. They've amazed me over the last year at the rate at which they've accelerated doing subprime lending and tweaking credit ratings so that more people qualify. So it's boggled my mind how they've done achieved all the exact same results as last time and somehow think the same thing won't happen. It's like slapping yourself in the face and thinking if you make the exact same motion and move your hand towards your face another time, you won't actually slap yourself. I don't get the logic. But that's where we are. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about this for a second because this article comes to us from Zero Hedge. Again, the articles from Zero Hedge oftentimes are tinfoil hat style. So the ones I tend to give more credence to are ones that take data or just talk about stories from other sources or provide data from sources that are super interesting numbers because they're simply bringing to this forefront things that no one else is really talking about, but that are actually, data from credible sources. In this case, the headline is U.S. credit card debt surpasses financial crisis record as student and auto loans hit new all-time high. Also blend this with conversations we've had before that 40% of graduates who have student loans believe they will not have to repay their loan. That is a bad mindset to be in because it ain't going to happen. And if it does happen, let's pretend it does. Let's pretend Bernie Sanders gets elected or whoever wants to waive all of this stuff. That again equals printing money. That equals very bad things. Imagine all of the various pension funds, retirement accounts, 401ks that are invested in financial securitized instruments that are based on student loans. Student loans are securitized like anything else. If you don't think that's going to hose everything. So, of course, they'll have to print money to solve that problem. So anyway, total revolving credit cards rose to $1,021.7 billion, an increase of $4.1 billion on the month and a new all-time high, taking out the previous record high set during the summer of 2008. So here's another thing where we're sort of emulating the really bad habits of before. And remember, the other thing I keep harping on is the overall debt profile. I stopped wanting to specifically worry about mortgage or car or education loans or whatever. Just look at the profile of debt. And this is another huge brick in that wall because once you reach a critical mass and something goes wrong, like inflation goes nuts, or the government starts printing money to pay pensions, or whatever the various things are we've talked about that could negatively affect the economy, all of those things cause this to become a stress. It causes your debt to become a problem you have to manage because your dollar's not going as far as it used to. See, that's where this bus ends. That's where the end of the line is. When these bad things happen, even though you may say, well, I don't have a pension that I'm relying on. That's not going to affect me. Or I'm not invested in stuff that affects my month to month. None of that stuff's important. Yes, it is. Even if you don't participate in it, you are a victim of it when it causes things like inflation, because that's the invisible tax on everyone. I don't care if you're on welfare or you make $15 million a year. Inflation hits you. It simply makes everything you buy more expensive. And I'll tell you what, if you believe that we'll go into a dire strait like that and that someone somewhere won't suggest that the solution to the problem is to tax you more, that's simply in addition to inflation. Inflation is a tax that gets passed every single year that nobody votes on, and it just happens, right? So that's why it's a concern, because you'll find yourself with a unbelievably staggering debt profile on the average American. And by that, I mean, how much debt are they carrying on their back? And they have to service that debt, right? They have to feed that big angry monkey on their back that is their debt. And they're feeding it bills. And at some point, maybe that debt is fixed interest, right? If you've got all fixed interest debt, great. That's always only going to consume the same amount. But everything else in your life, your rent, your food, any adjustable rate loans you've got, maybe that HELOC is an adjustable rate. All these other things that you have to pay are going to increase. Your electric bill will go up. Your water bill will go up. Your groceries will go up. Your gasoline will go up. All of those things go up. And as each one of those things nibbles away at the money you make every month and narrows the gap between what you make and what you owe, too many people, and this is what happens in every case, regardless of where the debt stress comes from, then the decisions have to get made of what am I going to cut? Maybe you cut some things out first. Maybe suddenly you're not buying that coffee at the beginning of every morning. Maybe you're trying to take the bus. Maybe you're trying to use public transportation. But what we've seen in the past is decisions get made by typical Americans that push things in a direction that make things get more scary. And that's defaulting on loans. And defaulting on loans is something that pushes all kinds of things out of whack. And it would absolutely hit the real estate world, particularly since one of the main things folks learned last time is that if you stop paying your mortgage, you don't get kicked out of your house right away. When you read the stories about people who were in their house for 3 years after they stopped paying the mortgage, how worried do you think the typical person is about that? Now, granted, there are folks who strongly believe, I signed an agreement, I'm not able to live up to it, so I'm going to get out of the house when I'm supposed to get out of the house. But last time around, we saw an awful lot of folks who didn't think that way. So I think we'll see the same thing again. Okay, now this is an interesting article that goes on to discuss quite a few other things. Personal savings is down. Let's see, I wanted to cover this. Considering the recent sharp revision to the U.S. household savings rate, which wiped out $250 billion in personal savings with the stroke of an Excel pen, the fact that U.S. households increasingly have to rely on their credit cards to support their daily lives will hardly come as a surprise. So the point this is making, and this is something you see before a bad thing happens, if inflation and cost of living is going to the point where folks are having to charge more, the data you'd love to have on this is what's the nature of what's being charged? What are they going into debt to buy? Are we finding folks using the credit card to do more of their daily purchases and then not paying it off and carrying the balance forward? Well, that should be super concerning because that's usually the first sign. That's the first indicator of bad stuff. Taking a closer look at the quarterly update in non-revolving debt, we find that for another consecutive quarter, both student and auto loans hit record highs of $1.45 trillion and $1.131 trillion, respectively. So 2.57 is to 2.581 trillion. That's a whole lot of money. Although there does appear to be a modest slowdown in credit issuance for these two largest categories. So yeah, if, you can check out the chart at the linked story. You'll find the link in the show notes for today's show. So there you go, folks. It's a little bit more fuel for the fire. It all continues to paint a picture that concerns me. So what's the action item for you from all of this? Well, first, take a survey of your current investments. Make sure you feel comfortable with them. Make sure that you feel like if you had a decrease or a downturn, you would be in an okay position. To figure out whether you'd be in an okay position, you need to look at your market. And one great way to do this, and what's great about this is you should have access to this data. You should be able to figure this out. You want to see if in the last downturn, rents went up or down in your area. Because I realize not every area is my area. If we have another downturn in my area, I'm not horribly worried if I own a rental property because rental rates tended to stay the same or increase in most areas as folks were moving out of properties and then having to find new accommodations. The only difference this time is that between then and now, the most building we've done has been in apartments and multifamily accommodation. So that kind of renting may take more of a chunk of displaced people than did last time. So just something to think about. In your market, if you saw a huge drop in rents, I would calculate the percentage of drop in rent over the period of time after the last downturn and do the math and figure out if a similar percentage downturn occurred in your market, could you weather it? That's it. Just to see if you can. Run a what if. And if you're convinced that bad things are going to happen and that you'd see a similar response in your community, then maybe it's time to sell that property, or maybe it's time to liquidate another property and be less leveraged. I don't know. You could have a lot of different solutions you could potentially explore, but just keep that in mind. Use this as a impetus to do a little more self-evaluation. See what you can find, and when you're evaluating markets that you want to invest in, try to focus on ones you think would be more immune or less impacted by a potential downturn. Those communities exist. And again, the great thing is we have not so old data from less than 10 years ago where you can look and see. We've talked about these communities in the past when we've done various market analysis. And we've seen some communities where the rents weren't really that affected or home prices weren't really that affected. Some very small changes or fluctuations in those numbers, which indicates a more stable type of community that doesn't have the volatility maybe that some of these other communities do. All right, folks. Yes, we did not get to all the articles I had saved and the things I wanted to talk about today, but we're going to go ahead and call it there. I certainly hope we've given you some interesting things to think about, at least some interesting news, if nothing else. Thanks again for listening, everyone, and I'll talk to y'all next time.